Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Wednesday, February 16th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The spring game is in 59 days, the Notre Dame game in 199 days. Yes, we passed a little milestone yesterday. And then the game against Michigan in 283 days. About a week ago, Tony Gerdeman and I asked for your questions so that we could answer them on the Buckeye Weekly podcast that we host together. And did you guys ever deliver? We have released 6 episodes covering topics ranging from the biggest assistant addition outside of Jim Knowles to some potential breakout stars in this year's defense, how the Buckeyes' preparation for Michigan might change this year, and a whole heck of a lot more. And we'll still have yet another episode coming out later on today. And even with that, we still had some questions left over, so we're going to do a listener questions episode of the Morning Scoop today to cover those. As you'd probably suspect from that intro, Tony is my guest this morning. Tony, thanks for being here.
You're welcome for me being here, Tom. You're also welcome for me producing this show for you today.
Yes, we'll have to talk about what producing a show actually entails, because I'm not sure you're sure what you understand what you're signing up for there. But let's start with a question from one of our more prolific question askers at VW Chad W. Could Ohio State win it all with the 30th best defense and Kyle McCord as the starting quarterback? Inquiring minds want to know. And just this feels like important context to this specific question. And, you know, how are you measuring the defense that this is the 30th best defense in the country is kind of an open question, because you know, total yardage, points per game, whatever. Last year's Ohio State defense, 2021 Ohio State defense, ended up 20th in the country in SP+. So they had a better than 30th in the country defense last year, and they had CJ Stroud as the quarterback, and they did not win the national championship, rather notably. So, Tony, I'm guessing the answer to this is probably no, but this year's defense should probably be better than that anyway.
Yeah, and then it also comes down to matchups and what do you end up against in the playoffs in the postseason, because I would assume 30th best defense and Kyle McCord as your quarterback should be just fine. You would think that would be good enough to get through the regular season into the playoffs, but there could always be some hiccups. Now, my question is, what if it's the 50th best defense from, like in September, and then is like the 10th best defense the rest of the way out, and you end up somewhere in the 30s, but you get better all year long, and the defense that you are in November and December is nothing like the defense you were in August, in September and October. And I guess that could happen with Jim Knowles bringing in a new defense where they better get better the entire year, like gradually get better. I think it still just comes down to the matchups, because 30th best defense, and you're saying that that's 10 spots lower than OSU's defense last year, and you tell people that, and they're like, oh, how could that be? Ohio State was not even a top 100 defense, because I've seen them, and they were bad, and I saw them miss tackles. And in today's football, a lot of people miss tackles. It's just part of the game. So 30th, that's a pretty significant step down. And we saw what happened against Michigan with a defense that was not all that great. So does that happen again? Does it happen against Penn State? Does it happen against Wisconsin? Does that happen against Georgia, Alabama, etc.? And if it happens twice in the Big Ten or once in the Big Ten, it may not even get to happen in the playoffs.
Yeah, and the matchups is a really important part of that conversation, because, obviously they were not great at the beginning of the year. They got a lot better throughout the course of the year, but then you ran into Michigan, where Michigan was doing some stuff that they were not used to defending, and all of a sudden you had some pretty significant issues. So yeah, it is going to be it is a matchup thing for sure. I was just pulling up as I was talking, the Ohio State points per game defense last year. They were 31st in the country, 22.8 points per game again as a defense. So they were basically a 30th in the country defense, if you want to measure it that way. And they did not win the Big Ten. They did not go to the Big Ten championship game. They did not make the playoffs. So, you probably need to be a little better than that, but I suspect they will be a little better than that at least. So, next one from at @ed_Eddie. Will there be any effort to get a little bigger up front on the defensive line with last year's results and Jim Knowles' new defense? Tony, what do you think about that?
I don't think so. I think they're big enough, certainly bigger than Oklahoma State's line under Jim Knowles. Keep in mind, Jim Knowles was playing a 225-pound defensive end half the time last year, and then the bigger guy in front of him was 250 pounds, and 250-pound defensive end at Ohio State is considered small and finesse, if you will. And Ohio State's defensive tackles, both the three tech and nose tackle, are heavier than Oklahoma State's. But I don't know that size and bigness is as important as the quickness that they want and the strength. And you look at Ty Hamilton, who's worked his way up from like 270 pounds to probably like 290, but they don't want him to lose the leverage and all of those things. And so I don't know that really they're going to look to be getting bigger. I think they're bringing Tyleik Williams, making him smaller. And you've got Teron Vincent, who has been the same, like 305 pounds forever. And Zach Harrison is the same. JT Tuimoloau may have dropped a few pounds. I don't think they're really trying to get bigger. I think they're just trying to be consistent, get into the backfield, and really just be one cohesive unit with the rest of the defense. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I don't expect a huge change, because this is not a change where you're going from a 4-man front to a 3-man front. That's typically where you would see like a real much bulkier defensive ends. That doesn't seem like that's the plan for what they're going to do this year. So I think they're still more or less planning the 4 linemen, and sometimes, as you have heard, there is a Leo position, and that Leo position will move around a little bit. Breaking news on this podcast, must credit Morning Scoop. The Leo position exists. But, you're not going to see 290-pound defensive ends, 280-pound defensive ends. It doesn't sound like that's what the plan is. As you said, JT Tuimoloau, I think, was listed as having dropped 3 pounds this year, so between the end of last season and the beginning of this season. So, yeah, it doesn't sound like they're planning on bulking up or having a 350-pound nose tackle or any of that kind of stuff. So, no, I think you're going to see similar-sized defensive linemen doing some different stuff, though. Next one from @Coach J Ryan, predictions on the Notre Dame score, and I looked this up again on SP Plus. This is ludicrously early, but Ohio State number 1 in the country in SP Plus, number 1 on offense, number 11 on defense. Those are the projections. Notre Dame number 22 on offense, number 10 on defense. The projected margin by SP Plus, they calculate kind of basically how many points better you would be than another team. Ohio State is 30.8. Notre Dame 19, so that's 11.8 points, and another field goal for home field. So I'm guessing Ohio State by 14. And you had looked up some of the you had thought like what is a typical Ohio State outpoint in the early season season opening games, which I thought was an interesting way to look at this. So what neighborhood are you looking at a score in?
Yeah, because I was thinking initially like in the 40s or something like that, and then I'm thinking, well, hold on a second, what do they normally score in the season opener? And then you look, and last year it was 45, and in other years you got 77 against a very bad Bowling Green team. But there's so many 40s. Even at Virginia Tech, Ohio State scored 42 in 2015. So it seems like the 40s would be where you would expect, especially this offense, because that's going to be what they score this season. That's going to be their scoring average, somewhere around 45 to 49 points probably. And so, why not get it going against a Notre Dame team that I assume will be ranked, but the quarterback situation still has to get fixed, and the new defensive coordinator Tom. I just put this together, and maybe I'm the last person. Al Golden, the Domers. The Golden Domer.
Oh man, that's good.
Is that crazy? But it's actually hiring Al Golden to be your defensive coordinator may be a little crazy. And if he did it just for the name play, I don't know if I agree with that.
Well, and you got to remember, think about how sweaty he got on the sidelines at Miami. You got to imagine that first week at Ohio Stadium, he is going to be a sweaty mess on the sidelines. I don't know. Notre Dame's with who? Are they still with Under Armour? I don't know if Under Armour's they built their whole company around sweat making wicking material. So I guess he'll be in good shape there. But yeah, I kind of like the idea of something in the 40s being about right for Ohio State. And Notre Dame is 8th in the country in SP Plus right now. So you'd figure, yeah, it's probably a top 10 game. Ohio State number 1. I'm going to guess they're not going to be number 1 preseason. That'll probably be Alabama, but number 2 Ohio State sounds about right. And yeah, that 14-point margin, say 42-28, 45-31, something in that neighborhood, that sounds probably about right for that game.
That would be a disappointment to give up 31 points to Notre Dame with a brand new defense, though.
Yeah, I mean, it would be, but so you're saying,
you already calling Jim Knowles a bust?
So you're saying that Ohio State fans are going to be upset with a multiple touchdown win over a top 10 team? That would be the first time in history that people started nitpicking a game and worrying about games that were 7 months down the line. Yeah, no, no, never. And again, this is I reserve the right to revise my prediction at some point between now and what did I say, 199 days from now. So I reserve the right to change my prediction a little bit between now and then. But a 14-point win, that sounds about right. And we don't. There are a lot of questions on Notre Dame's offense. What's that offense going to look like this year? And so you've got, I think, Notre Dame's defense is going to be pretty decent. They're losing some big players on that defense, but the defense sounds like it should be pretty good. And then Notre Dame's offense is going to have some questions. Ohio State's defense is probably going to have some questions. So I'm not going to go, I'm not going to go say 52-3 just yet. But again, there's a long way to go till 199 days from now.
What about like a 38-7? Would that totally floor you, or would you be like, well, this is what it was designed to do. This is what the score should be. It's like a 38-7 where you've got this defense, that national championship caliber winning defense. So you should beat up an offense that does not necessarily have a great offensive line. A running game is gone, and you're starting a new quarterback, and your receivers are iffy. Like, really, you should be able to put a number on that offense.
Yeah, I mean, 38-7, I think, would be still pretty surprising. I mean, how many good teams do you limit to 7 points? It was like, you go back to the last couple of years, and it's like Michigan State, and also I think that's the end of the list of teams that they've limited to 7 points that I would consider teams with a pulse. So, it's a possibility, but 42-20, I think, would be a very decisive, and that's basically one score different than what I'm saying. So, again, we'll have plenty of time to break this game down between now and the season opener. And we're going to use a lot of that time between now and that season opener to answer this last question, because this is like, if you are not a subscriber to the Buckeye Weekly podcast, this is like exactly our kind of nonsense. So this is from @DJK24129. Favorite name of an Ohio State player from recent years and all time. And for you Buckeyes Weekly listeners, P.S. I hope that 100 years from now, Tom and Tony's descendants will be playing the old-timey name game, trying to figure out when Hero Canoe and Steel Chambers played for OSU. That is a game that Tony plays on that podcast, where he will pick an old-timey name. One of my favorites, I was looking through the list and saw Gust Zarnes, and he would say, Gust Zarnes, when did he play? And I have to figure out, based on the name Gust Zarnes, when he played. If you guessed 1935 to 1937, you were a better guesser than I am. So, Tony, let's. Do you have any favorite names? I went through, and I there are some good ones in that list. If you've not done a deep dive, but do you have any favorites off the top of your head?
Well, I did not do a way back deep dive. What I did do is, I think Kenyon Rambo is an all-time name. Like, that's maybe the best Ohio State football name ever, in terms of just. That's a pretty cool name. Like, if you're going to create a name, you would never come up with that name, but then you'd see somebody else do it, you'd be like, dang, I should have come up with that name. But I went, just recently, if you look at the 2020 team that had you had a legend, you had a Steel, you had a Tough, you had a Master, you had a Gunner, a Jagger. I mean, so, and you had a Baron. That's pretty impressive. I would also say this year's team, Jupe Mitchell, and also last year's team, Jupe. I mean, Jupe is a great name. I also, Tom, Pala Ie Nao Teote, I respect him. Just, just call me EA. That's what everybody calls. Just you shorten it, because as a kid with a difficult name, anytime you can shorten stuff, I was all for that. Unfortunately, I've probably said this on one of the podcasts before. They tried to make me be Anthony in kindergarten, and I couldn't do it because I couldn't spell it. So we're going to be a Tony. Now, the problem, Tom, that we had 3 Tony G's in my class, in my kindergarten class. So then they tried to make me spell my last name. Couldn't do it. But I had more letters. So they knew, once it didn't look like any of the other Tony G's and all of these letters, that they knew it was me. So I respect the shortening of the name for EA. I'm not saying it was because he couldn't do the poly EA in kindergarten and just went with the EA. But those are some of my names. I know probably, though, my favorite all-time old name, Pearl Mengus.
Pearl Mengus, another good one, yes. I got to tell you, I cannot really relate to the problems of the long name, so I'll just have to take your word for it on that one. A couple of my favorites from back in the 90s. The 90s were apparently a time of great Ohio State names, not just Kenyon Rambo. Butler Benote, who holds the Ohio State school record for apostrophes in a last name. Nikki Sualua, who is both a fantastic fullback and also a fantastic name to say. Some good ones from a little earlier. Constantine J. Farkason from 1918, 1919, and 1922. So 100 years ago, Constantine wrapped up his career. James Jesty, who played in 1970. I have a couple, one appropriate for this week. This week with Valentine's Day, Clarence Loveberry in 1896.
Wow.
This was a good one. This is Erastus G. Lloyd. He played in 1899, 1900, and 1901.
What's the short version of Erastus? What's the Nick? What's the
Rassi? Rast?
Stissy? I don't know. Sorry,
Era?
didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, I don't know. He last played in 1901, so I'm going to guess he's not available for a podcast interview to follow up, but we'll see if I can figure that out. Irving A. Sack played in 1928. Not sure if he was a defensive lineman or not. Joseph Ujhelyi, 1928 to 29. A couple good Vans. Robert P. Van Blaricrom in 1932. Lear, as in the jet. Lear H. Van Buskirk, 1907 to 1908. Thurlow Weed, who went by Tad Weed. He was a place kicker who I remember the Great Jack Park book that came out in the early 90s. I got that when I was out in Ohio at one point visiting, and there's a bunch of stories in there about Tad Weed, who there was a guy who would try and sneak into the Ohio Stadium, and then would, like, just as a fun thing, like, instead of buying tickets, he would sneak in, and he, one of the times was he impersonated Tad Weed, and I'm like, that's a weird name. So Thurlow Weed, Tad Weed. Frank Zadwarny, 1937 to 1939. Gus Zarnas, as I mentioned earlier, and we have a couple themes here, Tony. Number one, these all sound like English land barons. Walter A. Landacre from 1890, Gerald P. Openlander from 1925, Ludwig Yards from 1932 to 1934. He sounds more like a German landowner, I think.
So don't the Buckeyes stay at Ludwig Yards for fall camp opening?
Yes, they sell the very tall beers there, I think. Yeah. And my absolute favorites, and it was like, how have I not seen this before? There's a William E. Painter from 1968, but he really just kind of goes in here with my absolute favorite, which is, this is just sort of a theme here. Thomas J. Kincaid, 1939 to 1941. So I don't know what kind of a player he was, but I can tell you what kind of a painter he was. So there you go, Thomas Kincaid. So
I did not know that.
I thought, there were some... I did not know that either. Yeah, I was going through and I was like, am I making that up? Is that... And it's spelled the same way as the painter. It is not the same guy as the painter. He was born...
I thought Roy Lichtenstein was the most famous Ohio State artist.
Maybe the best, not the most sold Ohio State artist. So there you go. So if that question was up your alley, boy howdy, will you like the Buckeye Weekly podcast? That is exactly our flavor of nonsense. We do actually talk football every once in a while too, but we talk a good bit of football. But yes, our listeners do enjoy throwing us some funny, weird questions every once in a while, and so there you go. So if you would like to hear the Buckeye Weekly podcast, despite all that, if you'd still like to hear the Buckeye Weekly podcast, you can find that wherever you find this fine podcast. You can just search Buckeye Weekly or search Buckeye Scoop. If you search Buckeye Scoop, that's going to get you all of our great podcasts, including Buckeye Weekly, the Big Me Kickoff Show with Kevin Noon, Around the Oval with Alex Gleitman, and the Gives in the Bank podcast with Mark Givler and Bill the Bank Green. And if you like to watch us instead of listen to us, you can see us all at youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. You can, if you're watching this on YouTube, we would really appreciate a thumbs up. Give us a thumbs up there. That helps other folks find these shows through the magic of the YouTube algorithm. And then if you want to see more and you get notified every time we post a new show, like the Buckeye Weekly show that's going to be going up a little later on today, hit that bell, get notified every time we post a new video. You never miss a thing. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.